Welcome back to Runway Life, the podcast for everyone in aviation. I'm here with my good friend, Andrew Barton. Andrew is a first officer with an airline that we will not be naming, but he has a lot of experience, and today we're going to talk about the initial steps for anybody inside of training. Andrew, take it away.
What do you want to know?
Okay, so you started flight training 2015, wasn't it?
No,
2014.
so I've been flying. I've been flying since I was 14.
Right.
Yeah. And we worked for the same employer for a while. That's how we met. And I'm sure you probably had the same experience I did. I had always wanted to get to the airlines, but life caught up, and I was working 6 days a week for this employer, and I was still just making ends meet somehow.
Yeah. And now that same employer actually pays like $7-8 more than what we get paid or got paid starting out. So it's completely it's insane right now. But yeah,
with inflation, I'm sure it's the
same. It was a certain employer with some ears, and we'll leave it there.
Yeah. So I did not come here to First Landings. I didn't come here fresh out of the book. I came here because I was stuck, and I was looking for a way to bridge that gap. And my wife and I got married in 2015.
Right.
And just before that, I had decided to email another podcast. I don't know if they still do it or not. It was called The Airplane Geeks. I'd been listening to them for years. And I kind of emailed them my question, 25 years old, 24 years old, telling them, hey, I'm stuck. I'm spinning the wheels. I've got the logbook. I've got some training done. I'm almost to where I need to be to like keep progressing. But every time I get close, the car breaks down, the fridge breaks down, life events happen, and everything I have saved goes right out the door. And 24, 25 years old, I thought I was pretty intelligent. And they came back at me and they said, well, it's because you don't want it enough. And I was pretty incensed by that because this is on the air. This is their podcast, their show. They basically came back and said, I think it was Max Trescott came back on the podcast and said, you just don't want it enough. To which I was pretty incensed at that point because I did want it. But the long and the short of it was he was right. A lot of getting to where I wanted to be was begging, borrowing, cheating and stealing. In his own words, you have to beg, borrow, cheat, and steal to get to where you want to be. And it didn't used to be that way, but it is that way now. And he had a very good point when he said it. So yeah, I came here 2016 was when I officially left our former employer.
Yep.
Poured everything we had. Every single thing we had, everything from our wedding funds even into. I took 2 weeks off of work and I just hammered out all the way through a sports CFI, and that was how I got started.
Yep. Well, yeah, your path right there was a very interesting one because First Landings at the time was more of a sport pilot training facility.
At the time, there was only one other school in the nation that issued more sport pilot certificates.
Right. And then, so of course, it was a totally different track than normal, right? Because now you were progressing through to being able to teach people in the sport pilot significantly faster than what you would have been doing with CFI and getting that experience. Both of us are natural trainers, right? I mean, again, the company that we used to work for believed heavily in training, and both of us were, golden feathers. So learning that side of it and learning how to, and just in case you didn't hear that, somebody just passed a check, right? So I can hear that in the background. Oh, solo? Okay, solo.
Yeah, awesome.
It's a milestone. There's Bell.
Yeah.
So we were, naturally inclined to wanting to share and teach and mentor people. And I think that transitions through life for us. Yeah. My path's very similar. I mean, I was married at 21, 2 kids by the time I was 32. And, you've got to grind it out, right? And you got to make it work. And you making that jump actually really triggered me in saying I have to make some changes to be able to do what I want to do without putting the family in complete poverty. So I have to admire you for doing that for me as well.
Well, I think at that point, my wife and I had been having a lot of conversations about the family dynamic. And at the time, being young, I was pretty averse to having kids. I have a daughter now, and I love her with all my heart. She's It's amazing how much having a kid changes your perspective on life, and I really can't say enough good things about my daughter. But
She runs 5Ks and marathons with you as well, right? Or is it
no,
five?
she ran a kiddie race in California, and
Yep.
while we ran the half and the 10Ks and whatnot.
Yep.
She's two, so she was 1.5 at the time, and she did like
know.
100-meter dash.
She looked like a monster coming through that finish line when I saw that picture.
She was in it to win it. She was in it to win it. But we were at the time talking about our future, and we were young, and we knew that we had to make. We knew that we wanted a future that we were in control of, and so we were working very hard to try and make that a possibility.
Yep.
And so I kind of looked at it as I can work hard and slog it out for the next 3 to 5 years and put us in a really good place for the future. Or I can hope that where I'm at today will give me a good quality of life while I build a family and then eventually try
Right.
later. And the more I looked at those two options, the more I realized that waiting was not an option. And it's really not in this career for reasons we'll talk about in the next couple of episodes. But if you have the ability to get it done sooner, even if it takes every single thing you have, like I thought I was going to bankrupt us at one point. We took on a significant amount of debt, moved us out of a very nice apartment in Kissimmee to a very not nice neighborhood up in Mount Dora. Did everything we could to cut the funds. But that's, as Max Trescott said, that's what it took. It took literally putting us on the edge. And there's a couple of reasons why, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But yeah,
No, it's and you gotta figure out how to make the finances work without having to go into massive amounts of debt. But if you are going to take the debt on, which I mean, obviously, we'll talk about that in a second. When you do that, just have a plan, right? And
Right.
be more frugal. Say, I know for a fact when you did go to the airlines, and again, we'll talk about that next, but you were doing, instead of going and doing what I feel most airline pilots do, which is going and eating out every single night and going and doing, the fast takeout food and everything else. I know you were doing meal plans and taking the meals with you in coolers, and that sticks with me. That one day, when Derek gets onto the airlines, I hope he actually takes on that advice and says, I should definitely pack that.
Applebee's every night is not good.
Yeah, no, I mean those calorie counts are woof. So, but yeah, so once you got your sports CFI, kind of talk about that progression from there.
Yeah, so I the goal was to become a sports CFI because we did a lot of sport pilot training here at First Landings. I got the sports CFI, I became full-time staff, and then I started to look at where I was, and I knew I needed to progress because I was at 150 hours, right, with a private pilot certificate. That's basically what that whole push was, to get me to the 150 hours with a sports CFI. And I got that. And then I became a member of staff. And now I'm kind of looking around me, and the business at First Landings at the time, we had lost a lot of flight instructors.
Right.
The airlines, the regionals in particular, this was 2018. They were hiring. They were hiring hard. Sorry, this was 2016. They were hiring hard, right? 2016, 2017, 2018, we were losing CFIs left and right. And so I needed to get another 100 hours, but also accomplish all those certificates in that time.
Right.
And so I already had one degree, but I decided it was time to go back to school for another. And this is where my path diverges. A lot of people think that the only way for you to get a degree through college with a pilot certificate is to go to a 141 university like Embry-Riddle or North NDU or MTSU. Great schools. Not worth it. Totally not worth it. The airlines don't care where you got your certificates. They don't care how much you paid Embry-Riddle. They don't care how much you paid NDU. They don't care that you're summa cum laude from MTSU. They don't care. The thing that matters to the airline is that you have the certificate. So I was looking at how I was going to finish this progression, and I decided I would go to a cheap, affordable state college. I would take out student loans, my Title IV funding.
Right.
I would maximize the loan but minimize the credit hours, and that would get me a refund check every semester. And I took that refund check and I immediately handed it back to my boss at First Landings and said, here's what I have. What can we do? And that was effectively how I got through my commercial multi for pennies. I think maybe 15,000, maybe 20,000
That's awesome.
at the most. And that's check rides, that's time building, that's commercial multi, CFI, instrument, that's all the above. Because there are ways to do it, and there are ways to get Title IV funding. You just kind of have to be savvy, and you have to realize the weight of what you're doing. And that was that progression from that point. So then I became a full CFI, and I was a full CFI here for about 8 to 9 months before I left for my first airline.
So you obviously, it's 1,500 hours, whichever way you cut it, to be able to get to the airlines, right? Yeah. So you were, what was that, 2018, maybe 2019 by the time you went to the first airline?
I had to check last night. It was July 2018.
Okay. So
yeah, it was early July 2018 when I went to PSA, my first airline.
I figured it was right around that kind of time because I left our previous employer just about... It was 2019. I got out of there in 2019. Yeah. So during that course, I've got a few, normally I do the rapid fire questions at the beginning, but we're going to ask that question. So what was your hardest of the ratings that you did?
Instrument.
Instrument.
And I, as an instructor to this day, maintain the instruments the hardest.
Right.
Because it's so unnatural.
Right.
It's so unnatural when you spent all of this time learning how to fly with your eyes, learning how to fly with your ears, learning how to fly with your sense of sight, feeling, and sound.
Right.
And the instrument is asking you to undo all of that. And not to undo all of that, but to start undoing that with pieces of limited information.
Right.
Because your attitude indicator will fail. Your compass might be inaccurate. Your turn coordinator might lose power. And you as an instrument-rated pilot in the soup have to be able to, when you're in a cloud, there is no backup. You simply have to manage the failures as they come. And so the big part of instrument training that's challenging, it's not the regulations, it's not the rules, it's not reading the charts. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of that at play. It's a lot of untraining your brain from how you just learned how to fly and retraining your brain into how to fly with none of that information and a partial panel.
Yep.
That is a very challenging environment.
It's 100% trust inside the instruments, right? I mean,
it's trust inside yourself because you have to be able to identify when you can't trust the instruments.
Yeah.
Right? You have to identify that something is not correct.
Yep.
Because there's a good chance, especially in general aviation, like it's different in a commercial jet, right? We've got lights, we've got warning systems, we've got all sorts of monitoring technologies and alerting systems. But if you're flying a 172 and you lose your vacuum pump and it's a steam gauge, right? If you lose your vacuum pump, you have to be the one to realize that for some reason your airspeed's increasing, but you're not adding power and you're level on attitude.
Yeah.
You're not actually level on attitude. Something's wrong.
Something is not copacetic at this moment. So
and then you have to begin triaging that, identifying that, resolving that, and your time is very limited.
Yep.
So I wouldn't even say it's trust in the instruments. It's trust in yourself to identify when the instruments shouldn't be trusted.
Yeah. Well, what I was going to say there was, from as long as we can remember, we've been able to see where it is that we're going, right? I mean, that's it. If I want to walk to my truck right now, I can look at my truck and I'm walking in that direction. When all of a sudden now it's, I can't see my truck. I don't know what's around my truck. I don't know if I'm about to walk out the back door. I can't see if there's any vehicles come in. So now you have to start relying on yourself to a certain extent. It's my instructor was very clear with me about flying by the seat of your pants to a certain extent. Hey, if you feel pressure on your right cheek, you're turning, or right or left cheek, you're turning. Yeah. If you start feeling a little bit lighter, well, you're probably descending. You feel a little heavier, well, then you're climbing, right? So he said you've got to make sure you're trusting in yourself as well.
Right.
Spatial disorientation is a real thing.
And it kills people.
Yep, pretty regularly.
Yeah.
I don't know if you ever watch Kelsey on 7-4 Gear. He actually talked about it. I watched an episode, and it must have been an old episode last night, and he said when he was doing his private pilot, he'd just finished, or he was just getting towards the end of his private pilot, and his instructor said, hey, we're coming in, but we're going to end up having to go through this cloud. Do you want to take it through?
Yeah.
And he's like, sure, why not? And that was his first taste of, oh, crap, this is real. And he also said, the instrument rating was probably his hardest.
There's so much you have to learn and you have to unlearn.
Yeah.
You have to unlearn how you just trained yourself to fly. And then you have to learn a whole new set of regulations. You have to learn a whole new set of terminologies and verbiage. What is an LPV? How is an LPV different than a VNAV, LNAV? Why is that important, right? What's the difference in needle sensitivity? Why do you have to have different RNP classifications for different airspaces? And why is that important? The regulations around how often you have to fly, how many approaches, when is an approach legal to continue, when is an approach not legal to continue. There's a whole set of rules and a whole set of regulations that go into the instrument while you are trying to forget everything else you knew. Because it is no longer I'm flying to the south shore of Lake Jessup and then my next leg is 10 minutes and I should be here. And if I'm not, then I'm this slow and the airspeed, the winds aloft have affected me and my fuel burn went up by this much. Right? You're kind of forgetting that while you're also not, because now you're navigating VOR to VOR, you're navigating NavAid to NavAid, and those things still apply, but you can't see the south shore of Lake Jessup. So now you're focused on making sure that you keep in your scan, your GPS, and going. It's a whole process. It's a whole process.
So another question for you is, if you had to choose one person to take a flight with, who would it be? That person can be famous, family, past, present, whoever it might be.
My daughter.
Your daughter.
And that's one of the great things I look forward to now as a dad is one of these days, hopefully teaching her. I've tried to teach my wife. No interest. She has no interest at all.
Well, I always say, if you want to feel what real stress is, you try to teach your wife or significant other anything. And it will definitely give you a major lesson in patience. My wife has repeatedly said she will never learn anything from me ever again. I had to teach her how to do how to drive stick shift, and she's like, "Yeah, you will never teach me anything ever again." So,
but is your clutch okay?
Yes. In the end, it was okay. And to that point as well, one of my most memorable flights was over at FA 83 in a Van Ander rental plane with my youngest daughter.
I bet she loved it.
Oh, I've got video of it, and she still shows it to her teachers on like the first day of school every year. So it's absolutely awesome. Memories, it's we get to take them everywhere with us, so it's important. And I would say, another question I just want to throw it out there is, what was probably your most memorable experience through, whether it's private, instrument training, commercial, instructor, something that really, really stands out?
Oh God, that's a loaded question because there's so many. I had lots of great students. There is one student that's still in the back of my mind. We didn't break any rules, but we certainly walked the gray line. He's passed on now. I had a student by the name of Mike Buffa. Amazing person. This guy could walk into a room and he would light up the whole room. And I remember he was kind of short. He was Italian. You knew he was there. He was very present in the moment. And Mike came down to us from Georgia to get a sport pilot certificate. And time was really important to him. And as an instructor, you always try and set the preface for your student that time in the logbook doesn't necessarily equate to competency in the airplane, because the airplane is a terrible classroom. It really is. And we finally had a conversation at one point where he told me that he was suffering from a very advanced stage of an inoperable and an untreatable form of brain cancer.
Okay.
And so this is where, like, as an instructor, now you're looking at the regulations.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's a lot of liability in your back pocket. He has a driver's license, and I've spoken with his physician on the phone who says that at the current time he's still safe and competent to operate an aircraft. So I've had that conversation. I know that there's a lot of reasons why he probably shouldn't be flying an airplane right now, and why maybe he shouldn't be, but this for him took me back to our old employer.
Yep.
You know what I did every single night.
Yep.
And in the population for which I did that,
Yep.
we were always focused on what we did had to be perfect. A 100% show.
Yep.
Every night, in the right order, at the right time. And it wasn't because a lot of people paid a lot of money to see what we did. It was because, like Mike, someone in that audience every single night wasn't going to get a second chance.
Yep.
This was it, right? There were Make-A-Wish kids in that audience every single night.
Yep.
There were parents with terminal cancers every single night. And here I was in the right seat of an airplane with somebody who had no more time. And I couldn't give them any more time. I couldn't give them any more. I can't do anything for him.
Yeah.
The only thing I can do is try and give him my 100% and hope he gets through it. And he did. He got his sport pilot certificate, and he was able to take his wife up. And he flew a couple more times up in Atlanta before his cancer progressed to the point that he just couldn't. And he passed away about a year later, and I still have a thank you card that he wrote me after he passed his check ride. And that's something I'll never forget. That's something that sticks with me.
Well, it's making the magic moment, right?
Well,
I take that through the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Because that was, a certain thing that we learned, and I get to. That's coining the phrase, I would say. Either way, it's a memory that nobody can take away from you, and you got to give somebody. Yeah. You got to help them get to that point. So, I think it's super important across the board.
I think it's what I took away from that, and I'll paraphrase this as best I can. You don't know what somebody else is going through. You don't know why they're in the back of your airplane. You don't know why they're trying to learn to fly. You don't know. And you also don't know the experiences they've had in life. And so it's always really important to try and make that connection. And it taught me to slow down and try to listen to people a little bit more.
Yep. No, I completely agree. Okay. I'm going to ask you one last question, and then we'll just about wrap it up. Okay.
Yeah.
ForeFlight or Garmin pilot?
Is there a question there?
I don't have that question. I am a ForeFlight junkie, but some people are a little different.
I'm going to say ForeFlight, hands down. I know some people swear by Garmin pilot. If you're doing this casually and recreationally, Garmin pilot's fine. If you want to be an airline pilot, you need to be using ForeFlight with Jeppesen plates from day one.
Right.
Hands down. That's just all there is to it.
I don't know if you've seen it. Matt Guttmiller has actually brought out his own version. Check that out whenever you get a chance. It was actually kind of an interesting one for a second. And anyone that doesn't know, Matt flew around the world solo at 18, I believe he was.
Yeah.
So, I take my hat off to anyone that makes that commitment. But ForeFlight is definitely my chosen weapon for the aircraft. So
yeah, hands down,
100% agree. So Andrew, thanks very much for this episode. We're going to be back for episode 2, where we're discussing more of the the safety by experience between 250 and 1500 hours. So
yeah, absolutely.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, brother.
Yeah,
take care. Stay safe.